You are watching Data Sessions Episode 9. This is the last part of our modern data warehouse series. If you want to watch the first two parts, you can click on the links. This part 3 will be all about big data analysis with Azure Synapse. Our speaker, Nilesh Gule, is a cloud and data solutions architect here in Singapore for Prudential. He is a three-time MVP, Microsoft MVP for Azure, and one of the community leaders here for the Azure community here in Singapore. I hope you find this video useful.
Okay, shall we get started?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Hi everybody, thanks for joining. Today I'll be talking about the third part of modern data warehouse using Azure. My name is Nilesh, and if you have not joined the earlier sessions, these are my social media coordinates where I blog and other Twitter handle as well as LinkedIn and my email. Feel free to connect with me. The agenda for this three-part session or the three-part series is to learn about how can we build modern data warehouse using the services provided by Azure. So we started with the first session where we looked at what are the different components of modern data warehouse. We looked at the data lake architecture. We then focused our energy on the data lake storage account, ADLS 2, and Azure Data Factory in part 1. And in part 2, we looked at Azure Databricks, which is Spark as a service offering from Databricks. We also looked at Delta tables and some of the performance benefits that we get when we use some of these optimized file formats like ORC and Parquet. And in today's session, we are going to talk about Azure Synapse or SQL Data Warehouse as it was called previously. We already touched base a bit on Azure Key Vault in the previous session, and I'll be again using Azure Key Vault in this session as well. So this is a quick overview of how the main components of modern data warehouse looks like. And this is the part 1 and part 2. So let me recap what we did in part 1. The ADLS or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, it provides us large petabyte scale storage, unlimited storage capacity. It has the hierarchical namespace, and we also get some of the performance benefits by using a Hadoop compatible driver, which is optimized for the ADLS Gen 2. It's called as the ABFS driver. And in terms of the cloud ETL, we looked at Data Factory. So some of the main features of Data Factory is it offers a scale out serverless data integration and data transformation. So we looked at various options. It has more than 100 connectors, which we can use to connect to cloud data sources, on-premise data sources, traditional RDBMS, as well as the modern data sources, APIs, and almost all kinds of data can be sourced and integrated using the Data Factory. And it also offers monitoring and management capabilities. So we have already looked at all these in the earlier session. In the last one, we covered the Apache Spark or Azure Databricks capabilities of Spark using Azure Databricks service, which is a collaborative Spark-based analytics service. So we looked at the different types of clusters that can be created. We also looked at auto-scaling capabilities based on the workload and the fine-grained access controls that are provided as part of the Databricks service. So let's start looking at the last part and the most important one, I would say, about Azure Synapse. What is Synapse? Previously, Synapse was called as the SQL Data Warehouse, and it is defined as limitless analytics service for enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. So we have so many jargons or keywords here. Let's try to decipher them one by one. So when we talk about big data analytics, the first thing that comes to mind is Hadoop and the main components of Hadoop, which is distributed processing. And when we talk about distributed processing, it's about parallelizing the workloads. And what are the different ways in which we can parallelize? So the most traditional way, or the one which is most commonly used before the advent of Hadoop, was symmetric multiprocessing or SMP. What happens in this case is you have multiple CPUs which are used to complete the individual processes simultaneously, and they share the same memory disk network. And you basically scale up every time you have the need to increase the firepower of your let's say SQL Server or any other server, you add more RAM, you add more processors to that. And these are also mostly based on the SAN, they are hosted on SAN. The alternate approach to this is what is done in things like IBM's Netezza database, which is the parallel processing, massively parallel processing, or what is called as MPP. This uses separate CPUs for running the processes in parallel. So the same program, single program, gets distributed across multiple nodes, and you get shared nothing architecture where each CPU has its own memory, it has its own disk, and you can scale out. If you have to add more firepower, instead of adding more CPU and RAM, you basically add more nodes to your cluster or to your setup. And this is similar concept which is used in Hadoop as well. So when it comes to the SQL data warehouse or Synapse architecture, it follows the similar concept where it uses a control node where the application or the consumer connects to and fires the queries. And then there are compute nodes where the actual work happens or the work gets distributed, the queries get distributed to these compute nodes. And there is also a service which is used, which is called as the DMS or data movement service. So what Synapse tries to do is, by default, it creates 60 nodes and it shards the data automatically across those 60 nodes. It uses the Azure Data Lake storage as a backing storage, and it tries to separate the compute and the storage part of the whole engine. And in terms of distributing the data, there are three options in which we can distribute the data. First one is hash, where we use a function to distribute the data across the 60 distributions based on a particular column. The other one is round robin, where all the data gets distributed uniformly across all the 60 nodes. And third one is replicate. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that the first one, which is the hash function, it uses one column and a hash function to hash that value. And you can see here that it can have situations where based on the hash value, you might have different row distributions across different databases. And this is good when you have large joins or you need to do aggregations on large number of tables. This functionality is good. The second one is replicated, where you have very small amount of data in the tables. And if you have to distribute that data or you have to move that data for every query that runs or every processing that happens, it doesn't make sense. So what we try to do is replicate that table across all the distributions, because the volume of data is very small, and that optimizes the query performance. And the third one, which is round robin, it sits in between these two. So that is good for data loading kind of scenarios where you are staging the data and you want to quickly load data into the data warehouse. We can use the third option, round robin option. So before I go into the warehouse unit, let's go into the portal and see how do we provision the SQL data warehouse or the Azure Synapse. So I've logged into the Azure portal, and let me go into the resource group. If you remember from the earlier sessions, I have a resource group for SQL Pass, all the objects or all the services that I'm using. So previously I've created the data bricks, I've created the data factory, Key Vault. I've also created ahead of time instance of Azure Synapse here, but let me just walk you quickly through a process if you were to create a new one. So we can create a new Synapse by searching for Azure Synapse here. There are multiple options which appear when we search for Synapse. The first one is the workspace preview. So what I'm talking now is the SQL data warehouse part, which is migrated or which is renamed as Azure Synapse Analytics. There is also an extension to this, and that is in preview, which is called as the Synapse workspace preview. So maybe once this becomes GA, we can have a session around this. So for this session, I will be mainly focusing on the data warehouse part, which is the SQL data warehouse, the Synapse Analytics part. So when I select this and I click on create, I get the usual options to select what is the subscription I want to choose, what is the resource group, and then we need to create a SQL server, a logical server, where this SQL pool will be hosted. So we can create a pool of resources, and we can give a name here like SQL pass part 3, for example. And I already have the SQL server, so I can reuse that, or I can create a new instance of the SQL server where this pool is linked to. And then we choose the performance level. So this is where we choose what is the level of parallelism we need. And based on that, the initial size of our SQL data warehouse is created. And this is called as data warehouse units or DW unit. And based on the volume or the size of data warehouse unit we choose, we would be charged per hour on that. So the smallest unit here is 100 data warehouse unit, DW100. This is charged about 2 USDs per hour. And as we go up, we would be charged based on the number of the units that we select. So let's say I select the 200 here and I say apply. Then I get the next set of options, which is the networking. Where do I want to position this service? Is it within the private endpoint or within my firewall? Or I want to expose it using the public services. I can add a private endpoint here to access only from the virtual network. Let's say I have a virtual network created, then I can expose that only to this virtual network. So in the interest of time, I would say we skip this part because I've already created this service. So let me go back and we can look at the properties of the one which I've already created. So you can see here that I have the SQL server and the SQL pool created. Let's go into the SQL pool, and we can see that it has this Gen 2 DW100 units because I created this with the minimum configuration, and it has the other features like geo replication. It can have a geo backup. Also, in terms of the security, we can have advanced data security enabled, where we can look at the classification of the data. If there is any vulnerability in the data, all that can be done using the advanced threat protection facilities provided by Microsoft. We also have auditing in terms of what queries are run against the SQL server. Currently, it's not enabled on this server, but if I enable, I will get the audit log by default. And then we have the connection settings where I can control the firewalls and the virtual connections which are allowed to connect to this particular SQL server. And from a security data security point of view, we also have transparent disk encryption. So in the previous session, there was a wonderful talk about data encryption and how we can encrypt data. And the speaker had spoken about the TDE, how does transparent disk encryption work. If you're interested, you can go back to that video from the last session and you can have a look at that. So again, in this scenario, I have not enabled the data encryption, but it's just a flag. And once I enable it, it is enabled for my SQL pool. So these are the common properties. We also get the connection strings in order to connect to this particular data warehouse instance. And we get like ADO.NET, we get the JDBC connection, ODBC, PHP, and Go. We can just take this connection string and use it in our application. Now let's go back to the presentation. So how does this data warehouse units impact the execution? If you remember, I created DW100 as the parallelism or the mode of parallel nodes for my data warehouse instance. So that is where the engine, the SQL data warehouse engine, tries to connect to the workers, or it creates those many number of workers to work with those 16 instances of the data that is in my storage layer. So if I select 100, I will get one worker. But let's say I change the number of data warehouse units to 600. In that case, the engine is same, but now it has access to 6 different workers and it can parallelize the work more. And same way, if we increase the number of workers or the data warehouse units, we will have more number of workers. So this data warehouse unit becomes your unit of or degree of parallelism in terms of how many workers are allocated to your engine. Now let's look at how we can use this SQL data warehouse in our solution. So we talked about Spark last time, how Spark can be used to optimize or how Spark can be used to read data. So I'm going to extend that same example, the processing of CSV data or processing of that movie lens data set, and add the flavor of SQL data warehouse into this. So in this notebook, I'm processing the ratings file, CSV file, and I go through reading the CSV file, and then I do a filter here. Initially, I just display all the records and I write it into CSV output. Then somewhere down the line, you would see me filtering this for ratings which are greater than 3. And what I'm trying to do now is I want to write this filtered ratings or the filtered data frame to the SQL data warehouse as my process result. In order to connect to SQL data warehouse from Spark, I need a couple of things. So this diagram talks about what are the ways or what are the different connection points which are required in order to connect the Spark with SQL data warehouse. So from the previous session, we know that Spark has this driver and the executor part, where driver is like the main program which drives the distributed workload, and executors are the ones which actually perform the parallel work. So from that point of view, when we want to connect to the SQL data warehouse, Spark driver uses a JDBC connection, which is the normal username, password, and the SQL server and the database. So if I go back into that connection string, this is what I will be using to connect. And it uses JDBC connection. So I can take this JDBC connection string and I can put it in my Spark code. Once the Spark driver has the connection, the way these executors work is instead of writing data one by one to the SQL data warehouse, it tries to batch all the data that is processed and write it in one shot. And for that reason, it creates a temporary location in the data lake storage where the executors connects to the data lake storage using storage account key or the OAuth token, and then they write this data into data lake storage. And from the data lake storage, there is a connection which the SQL data warehouse uses. The storage account, it writes it into the SQL data warehouse like a bulk insert. That is again done using either a storage account or using a managed service ID or MSI. So for this purpose, what I have created is I've used the managed service ID, and the way this works is for my SQL server, I assign an identity, and this identity is given access to the storage account. So that way, when I go into my storage account, if I look at the different access, who has the access, I need to give permission to that SQL Server account or the ID, the managed identity, so that it can work with this particular storage account. So here you can see that it has been given a storage blob data contributor access, and because it has this access now, that can write back into the SQL data warehouse. So that is how we have this connection established between the storage account, the Spark driver, and between the SQL data warehouse and the Spark driver. So let me go back into the notebook. So this is what is happening here. What we do is we use the data frame and we use the write function of that. We use a custom driver or a driver which is provided by Databricks for SQL data warehouse connectivity. So this is like your ADO.NET driver or JDBC driver or SQL driver, which is available for other connectivity options, but this is optimized for SQL data warehouse. And then we provide the connection string. So this connection string is of the format, which is what I showed just now. So it is this JDBC connection, but I am retrieving this from my key vault. So from the security point of view, I don't want to expose the username password, and I'm using the key vault for that. So if I go into the key vault, you can see that I have created a DW JDBC connection string as a secret, and that secret has that value, the whole connection string. So I'm using this, I'm redacting that as part of this connection string fetch here using the dbutils and the secret scope. So in a secure manner, I get the connection information. I don't have to expose anything to the end users. And then I use this MSI. So this is that option which allows me to write data from the storage account in bulk insert mode into the SQL data warehouse. And then I provide the table option. What is the name of the table that I want to store in the SQL data warehouse, and the option to the mode that I want to use. So since this is like the ratings which are greater than 3, I don't really care what were the earlier ratings. What I want to do is just overwrite the complete table here. So I overwrite if there is existing table that will be overwritten using this mode as overwrite. I also have the mode as append if I want to append the data instead of overwriting it. And finally, I specify this option, which is the temp directory, where I want to temporarily store that data. So I'm storing it on my file system. So this file system name is the ML latest, and the directory name is I'm not using the directory name. So I basically use ML latest, then the storage account, and I create a temporary folder where this data would be temporarily written. And once the data is available, once everything, all the processing is done, it will be bulk inserted when I call the save method. So that is how Spark is interacting with the SQL data warehouse. So let's connect to the SQL data warehouse and see if this data is available. In order to connect to the SQL data warehouse, I can use SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, or I can use the Solution Explorer, not the Solution Explorer, the Data Explorer, Azure Data Explorer. So this is a cross-platform tool, and I'm using Azure Data Explorer in this case. The connection is same like we do in the SSMS. So I can use the SQL login. I can provide the server name, username, and password here. And once I'm connected, I would be able to see the databases. So we have the system databases, and we have a database named SQL ST pool created here. And in the tables, you can see that I have this filtered movie ratings table, which I can query using normal SQL query. So let me just fire this and see the results. So we can see that those filtered ratings, I'm grouping them based on the rating ID or rating, and I'm counting the number of users and counting the number of movies. So this is the number of users and the movies based on each type of the rating. So now we have gone and from our filtered ratings, written them onto the Azure Synapse or SQL Data Warehouse. Let's look at the other scenario where I want to read that data. So for this purpose, I will use the other notebook which I had in the previous session. So this one is where we filter based on the different types of data, where we try to partition the data based on ORC, Parquet, or Delta files. So I've taken one of that data set or data frame, and I have written it the whole, all those 700 MB or 1 million records. So the concept is same here. When I try to write, it's writing the complete movie ratings table. So all the other things are same here in terms of the format or the driver, which I use, the connection string, the MSI option table, and the temporary directory. Once it is written, I want to read it back. So for reading, I use the spark.read function, and I use the load instead of save, and the table name is movie rating. Once I've read that data, then I can show it, or I can just visualize it. And if you're familiar with the notebook features or Jupyter, we can also visualize the data. So I can, instead of just seeing a tabular data, I can visualize it using pie chart or using bar chart, or all these options which are available. So that is the flow, or that is how we interact from Spark with the SQL data warehouse. The next step I want to do is, once, let's say I'm a data engineer or I'm data scientist and I've built this notebook, how do I integrate this in the end-to-end workflow, where I integrate the data, I process that data, and then I store that data in the SQL data warehouse. So for that purpose, I can use Data Factory and I can create a pipeline here. If you remember last time, I had shown how to trigger a Spark job from Data Factory. So I will use this same pipeline and I will call a Databricks notebook from here. So in this Databricks notebook, I'm connecting to the same notebook which I showed just now, the query performance partition, where it will write into the partition table. So it will call this and it will write the data. So there is nothing special in this. What I want to show is the other part, where if I want to get data from SQL data warehouse into Data Factory. So for that purpose, I need to create a connection or the link service, and I've established a connection here. And let's walk through the properties of that. I'm using the AutoResolver runtime to host this service or this link service. I can get the service name from my Azure subscription. So I'm connecting to the SQL pool, and then I can specify which method I want to connect using a service principal, managed identity, or SQL authentication. In this case, I've chosen SQL authentication, and I need to provide the username and the password. So password, again, I'm taking it from the key vault instead of hard coding the password and exposing it to the end users. I'm connecting securely, and the password name or the secret name here is Synapse password. So in this case, I've stored just the password in key vault. And I can test this connection. You can see that the connection is successful. That means using this, now I can connect to SQL data warehouse. I have a pipeline which is pulling data from SQL warehouse. Let's say I have a scenario where data is stored in the SQL warehouse and I want to give an extract of that, or I want to transfer that data into a different format. So what I did is I created a pipeline here which would transform that data into a JSON file. And in the source, I created a data set which is looking or connecting to that ratings data source from SQL data warehouse. And in the sink, I'm connecting it to a JSON file. And when I execute this, I've already executed this pipeline, and we can see it here. You can see that it is able to pull all the information, about 600 MB, these many number of rows using one connection, and then it writes this data as JSON file, about 1.8 GB on the ADLS storage. So this way we can connect the SQL data warehouse using Data Factory. We can process those results and write them back into the data lake storage. Next, I would like to also show about the external data sources. So external data sources, if you come from a Hadoop background, you might have heard about things like the managed tables or the external tables. When we work with Hive, Hive has this concept of the managed and the external tables. External tables, what they allow us to do is to separate the data and the metadata part of it, or the definition of the schema of the data. So even if we delete or drop the external table, only the metadata or schema of that table gets deleted. Data is still residing in the location from where we refer to the external table, or these tables are not part of the SQL warehouse. They are created externally. That's why it's called as external table. So let me show you how to create the external tables or external data sources. The first thing we do here is we create an external data source. So let me just minimize this. External data source is like a pointer to data which is not sitting inside SQL data warehouse. It's sitting in the storage account, but we want to refer to that data. In this case, I'm creating a type of Hadoop external data source. I want to name it as Movie Lens external, and the location for that is my ML latest file system and the root level of that. And I'm using managed service identity to connect to this external data source. Once I have the data source, I can define the file format, and these file formats are the ones which we discussed last time, like the object storage or the row columnar storage, the optimized files for the object type of files. So here I'm connecting to a CSV file, or I'm creating a file format for CSV, and I specify different options. Like I know my first line in my CSV file is a header, and the actual data starts from row number 2. So I'm giving first row as 2 here, and what is the field terminator? In this case, since it's a CSV file, it's a comma as the field terminator. So I can specify these options, and I create external file format here, or external the format with which I want to interact with those external files. And finally, I create an external table. So this is just a metadata or the schema which I create on top of that external file. So based on the number of columns that I have in my CSV file, I define the schema that I need a user ID, a movie ID. These are integers. The rating is float, and there is a timestamp which I'm converting into int here. And this table is named as the movie rating external. And the location for this is the ratings.csv from my movie lens dataset. So we start from the data source, which is the top level file system, and then we refer to the relative folder here within that data source. And I also specify which is the data source. So that is how this link happens between the actual file, the ratings.csv, and the data source. And then we also link it with the type of the file format. Now, what happens in this case is I can query this table without moving the data from the storage account into SQL Data Warehouse or Azure Synapse. This query happens in place, or data is still in my storage account, and I'm able to query that. So let's see here how we can query that data. So I'm firing a normal select query here on top of that CSV data, and I'm just referring to that as a normal table rather than treating it as a CSV. Okay, so you can see that here it's now able to get the data from that CSV file or from the storage account. Now this data is not in the managed table or the internal table. It is as an external table. We can look at this by going into the storage account. So let me switch back to the portal and we go into the storage account. Let's go into the location from where it's pulling that data. This is the ML latest file system, and we have the movie lens. This is the file which I'm referring to, ratings.csv. So what I will do quickly is let me drop this table. And let's see what happens. Now, this table has been dropped. You can see here. We don't have that external table. Let's see what happens to the data. You can see that the ratings.csv file is still there. It did not delete the data. That is the benefit of using these external tables. Now, if I create the table again, the schema using external table, we would be able to query it again. So let's refresh here. Now we have the external table created. Let's query this again. And it would take some time, but we should be able to get the results from there. So that's one of the benefit of using these external tables. So in terms of the external data source, what we have support for is the Hadoop as well as data lake storage, ADLS. This is how we create the connection to the external data source. We looked at the external file format for CSV, but there is also support for the Hive row columnar file format RC. There is ORC file format, and Parquet is also supported. There is also support coming for JSON. So all these optimized file formats are currently supported as part of the external file formats. We can also use extended properties like the data compression, even if the file is compressed using gzip or snappy kind of compression technique. We can still work with those files, and we can have different date formats and field delimiters, which are commonly used across these file formats. Then we also looked at the external table, how to create and query that. Before we move on to this, let me also show you some of the things which we get as part of the monitoring. So when we provision the service, the data pool or SQL data warehouse, we also get built-in monitoring or metrics. So I can go into the monitoring section and I can monitor the queries which are run. I can also look at, let's start with the query activity first. We ran some queries here, and you can see that I get built-in or out of the box the different statistics about the query. I can look at which query ran. So there was a query which was getting all the movie ratings, and I can find out how much resources were used for that query, how much time did it take to run that query. All this kind of statistics and the workload type, all this is available. We also have different metrics which we can measure. Like I want to say, see how many data warehouse units are used. I can create a dashboard here quickly to see how many units are being consumed. And I also get this self-service kind of capability where I can select a different time range, and I can see this data across different time ranges. Another good feature of this is we can also pause the SQL data warehouse. So you can see here that there is a pause option. Let's say because the compute and the storage are separated in SQL data warehouse, if we don't need the compute capabilities, then we can pause while the processing power is not required, and the data will still be available because the data is stored in the storage account. We can also scale this. So let's say I started with initially 100 or 200 as data warehouse units. I can scale it to a higher value here. And the last part which I want to show is the workload optimization, or we can assign resources, we can limit resources. If you worked in, let's say, Hive kind of scenario or big data using Yarn resource management on Hadoop, this concept is similar, where we can limit the number of resources which are allocated to the queries or the jobs which are running. So what this does is we create a work group here, and it tries to assign minimum resources, maximum resources, and we can cap it. So this is to avoid, let's say, one process taking whole of your data warehouse resources. If you have the need to have multiple users or multiple systems or multiple processes running concurrently, you can limit the number of resources which are taken by a particular group of resources or particular jobs. And this allows us to set limits, set caps on those resources which are used for one individual group of resources. So that was about the workload management. Now let's look at some of the things where SQL Data Warehouse might not be a good fit. Because we are talking about big data analytics and the MPP kind of architecture, there are scenarios where although all these good capabilities come in out of the box, this SQL Data Warehouse or Azure Synapse might not be a good choice. First one is if you have an operational workload or OLTP kind of scenario where you have high frequency reads and writes, and you're doing very singleton kind of queries. This is not the kind of scenario we should be running, or this is not the kind of workload we should be running on SQL Data Warehouse. Also, if we are having very high volume of single row inserts, like a streaming kind of scenario where we have many small inputs coming in, and these are very unitary in nature, it is not good to be part of SQL Data Warehouse. Data preparations are another case where it's not good fit, and incompatible file formats like XML. Where it's really good at is in case of analytics. If you are working with large quantities of data and you really need that big data analytics firepower, then this is really a good fit because you have those shards automatically created. There are 60 instances where the processing can be parallelized and large volumes of data can be stored. You can model them, you can shape them, you can transform them using SQL-like queries or using the familiar SQL syntax. And when we are running the analysis across large data sets, so it's really suited for analytics use cases and where the data sets is very large. So in summary, what we looked at is the Azure Synapse. It follows the MPP architecture, massive parallel processing. It can be paused when we are not needing it or when we don't need all the compute power. It can be optimized for analytics workloads using that work group isolation mode. It supports external file formats and it works with Polybase. So Polybase is a technology which is used to work with external tables, and it has been there even with SQL Server since 2016, I guess. It is working hand in hand with the Azure Synapse. And this is used when we use those Spark jobs. So if I go back into Spark and where we were running those Spark queries or Spark operations, I should be able to show you where Polybase is getting used. Let me run one of these. So partition, okay. Let's clear all these results and state and run all of this again. So the Polybase gets used in this temp directory location where we are trying to write the data temporarily. When the SQL Data Warehouse and Spark, they use this temporary location, Polybase is used internally by the SQL Data Warehouse connector. With the recent version of Databricks runtime 7 and above, the process here is actually optimized and it's using copy activity, which is even more optimized than Polybase. So if you're using the latest runtime of Databricks, it would use copy instead of Polybase for writing. But I saw that when it tries to read, it is using Polybase. So when it comes to this cell here, while reading, we should be able to see somewhere here that the Polybase is getting used. So you can see here, this is where when it's reading that data from SQL data warehouse and presenting it using these notebook cells, it's trying to use Polybase to bring that data into that temporary location. Okay. So these are some of the references I would share with you. These slides will be available on Speaker Deck and SlideShare, so you can go through them. I've given the references to what is different between a SQL Server and SQL Data Warehouse, some of the main differences, and then the links to what I've discussed during this demo from Synapse, the workload management, the external files, the tables, file formats. And there was also this SQL Data Warehouse benchmark, which was done a couple of years back, where Microsoft published with the help of a third party that SQL Data Warehouse is quite performant or one of the best when it comes to dealing with large quantities of data. So maybe we can quickly have a look at that. And if I remember, it was more than 20% faster compared to the other cloud warehouses from the competitors. So you can see the results here using the standard TPCH benchmark. It was much more faster, for the 67% faster than Amazon Redshift when it came to workloads of the size of 30 terabytes. And then if you are interested in exploring more about the SQL Data Warehouse, there is also a MS Learn module or a learning path, which is about 3 hours worth and consists of 3 modules in that. You can have a look at that. Thank you for attending this session. Please provide the feedback. And in case you joined in late, my name is Nilesh, and these are the different options using which you can connect with me. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Hi, everyone. If you have any questions, you can either ping in the chat box or you can directly unmute yourself and can ask.
Yeah, I do have a question, Nilesh. Last week we discussed about Azure Databricks, right? And looking at the demo today, there's a lot of overlap on what you can do on Databricks and on Synapse. Is there a good convention on when to choose Synapse over Databricks, or between Databricks and Synapse? Is there any good advice on when to use what?
That's a very interesting question, Pio, and there is a lot of discussion going on this topic. The general thing is, if you are dealing mainly with structured kind of data, right? If your main thing is to work with structured data and consolidate that using SQL queries, then the Synapse scenario is good. If you don't want to move too much data, you can just land it in data lake storage. You can create external tables, and you can use the combination of these external tables plus the managed tables that you have within Synapse. But let's say you have data which requires much more complex processing. You need those Spark kind of features where you have, let's say, semi-structured data or data which is sitting in images, PDF files, and you need to process that kind of data, then Databricks is a good option. So I would say it depends on the use case. And in fact, with the next version of Azure Synapse, they are coming up with Spark on-demand capabilities as well. So whatever we are doing with Azure Databricks now can be done as part of the Synapse workspace itself. So there is going to be integration, native integration, without using the Databricks, but using Spark as part of Azure Synapse itself. So I think it also depends on the kind of data that you're dealing with. So things like many people now work with this ORC files or Parquet files, Avro files. So Spark has better support for them. It is coming to Synapse, no doubt, but there are a lot of jobs, or there are a lot of code which has been written to work with this kind of data. And then it might be easier to work with them using Spark as compared to working with just CSV file or normal tabular data.
Awesome. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Let me just check on the chat. Anyone else?
No, I think that there's no other questions.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nilesh. It's really nice session. Yeah. If anyone have any questions, you may ask, or you can also maybe email or to us to Nilesh, and maybe on Twitter or Facebook, yeah. Or if please help to provide your feedback, which is already we have pinged the feedback link on the chat box. Okay, so yeah, let me share my screen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nilesh, for a
Thank
great
you very-
three-part series.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting me.
Hope it's not the last. Yeah.